Hey, the Guoba here to talk about our brand new DPS. We're starting 3.0 off with a banger. The Herta is an explosive unit that self-buffs a ton, but unlike previous large self-buffers, she also remembered to increase her own multipliers on top. She destroys AoE enemies, can do great into fewer amounts of enemies, and has future-proofing thanks to the way she generates ultimates. Today I'll explain how her kit works because there is a whole lot of text. Then I'll review Eidolons. Then it's on to her best builds that I've calculated, including main stats, stat goals, and more like best relics and lycones. Finally, teams and synergies at the end. If this video helped you, make sure to like and subscribe and also share to others that need help. Thanks, and let's begin. So, the Herta is our second Ice Erudition unit, and weirdly enough, also our first Ice Erudition unit. Base stats, she has a very nice base attack, and a deceptively high energy cost. It's not that bad in practice, as we'll see. For trace priority, just max out her talent and then skill and ultimate. You can ignore the basics, but all three of these other abilities contribute to a lot of damage. And speaking of her abilities, let's now check them out. Her kit is very long, unlike Nasus's, so I'll try my best to explain in simpler terms with infographics I've created for you guys. First off, interpretation stacks will come up a lot in the abilities, so I'll explain them a bit now. You'll stack them up through various ways. For example, the Herta can apply them herself on abilities. Ally attacks, including the Hertas, can apply them. And there are a bunch of bonus ways of getting them through her traces. Basically, attacking the enemy a bunch will stack these up to a cap of 42. And the more stacks, the more good things happen. So her skill will deal ice damage to the target you select and inflict a stack of interpretation to that target. Then it will deal ice damage to the target hit by this attack, and then their respective adjacent targets. Then this will happen again. What this means is if you are versus 5 enemies, the following attack pattern happens. If you select the middle target, they get hit once. Then they get hit a second time and adjacent enemies are hit. Then the adjacent enemies of the original enemy get this repeat attack, meaning they get hit again and their respective adjacent enemies are hit. Basically, look at this graphic and know that the more enemies, the more damage by quite a bit. She double dips in enemy count-based damage, just like her 4-star version can do too. Her ultimate will rearrange the number of interpretation stacks on all enemies and prioritize giving the most amount to elites or bosses. So if we have a field of enemies with small amounts of stacks, elite on the field will ideally get capped to 42. Then she will deal damage to all enemies. And then she will self-buff by 80% attack for 3 turns. And then she will immediately take action and gain 1 inspiration, and inspiration enhances her skill. So her enhanced skill consumes this stack of inspiration, meaning 1 enhanced skill per ultimate at E0. This has the same effects as her regular skill with all those attacks bouncing, except a bit better on the multipliers, and she also does a small multiplier of damage to all enemies on top at the end. So what's so special about it then? Well, that's where her talent plays a part. First off, enemies entering battle get an automatic 1 interpretation stack, and at the start of each wave she applies 25 to a random enemy, prioritizing elites and bosses. Cool. So anyways, when her enhanced skill is being used, you will select a target, known here as the primary target. Depending on how many stacks of interpretation this primary target has, the multiplier for her enhanced skill will be increased. The attack on the primary target gets an 8% increase for every stack, and the other targets get a 4% increase. If 2 or more units in the team follow the erudition path, so 1 extra when including the Herta, you double this stack increase. Interpretation can stack to 42, so with 2 erudition at max stacks, this is a 672% multiplier increase to the primary target. This multiplier increase only happens once, and it happens during the big AoE attack right at the end. Again, it calculates the multiplier based on the primary target you choose, so it does not matter how many stacks other enemies have. You want to prioritize your enhanced skill on the highest cap stack enemy for a reason. And here is my full graphic detailing all of the hits this ability does, and how much attack scaling enemies will receive before the big bomber. Now, when using this enhanced skill, you will reset the stacks on the primary target to 1, so you have to build it up again, right? But actually, if an enemy leaves or gets defeated, interpretation will be transferred to other enemies, again prioritizing stronger ones. And also, she consumes the stacks and then attacks, meaning her enhanced skill applies some more post-consumption. So all of this combined with the fact that her ult will rearrange the stacks, means you can get back to this 42 cap on an enemy pretty quickly. Now we'll look at the technique after traces, since they are pretty important. Her A2 makes allies inflict 1 stack of interpretation on enemies they attack. This includes herself, meaning her skill, ultimate, enhanced skill can all apply some on top of the base amount. And every target hit also makes the Herta regenerate 3 fixed energy. Note it's fixed energy, unaffected by regeneration rate. And then, if she uses her enhanced skill and targets someone with 42 stacks, this whole enhanced skill gets a 50% ice damage bonus. This trace is key to how she gets her ultimates, and it's why she wants certain sub DPS more than others. Her A4 gives a team-wide 80% crit damage if the team has 2 or more Erudition units, the 1 extra including herself. You heard that right, a Bronze's ultimate crit damage, but stronger and permanent, and from an Erudition unit. It also makes the A2 always consider at least 3 targets as being hit. What this means is even if one enemy is hit by your ally, it will always regenerate 9 fixed energy for the Herta. If more than 3 are hit, then you get the normal extra amount. The A4 also applies an extra stack of interpretation every time an ally attacks, and it will apply to the highest stack count among enemies hit. And finally, if the attacker is Erudition, you get another 2 stacks on said enemy. Basically, team-wide buffs, more consistency in single target for the Herta, and better interpretation stacking. I made this graphic to understand her interpretation stacking a bit better now that we have looked at her traces. So if she uses the skill, she applies 1 to her chosen target because that's what her skill does, but then all enemies hit get 1 from her A2, and then the highest stack enemy gets another 1, and then they get an extra 2 since she's Erudition. Finally, her A6 gives her a stack of Answer up to 99 whenever interpretation is inflicted on enemies. Totaling her self buffs including traces, we have the following: 80% attack for 3 turns upon ulting, 50% ice damage for her enhanced skill when targeting a 42 stack enemy, 80% crit damage to herself and the whole team with the second Erudition in the team. The Herta finally gets ice damage bonus for more attack and also speed in her trace bonuses. 3 lovely stats. And so as for her technique, it does 3 different things, all benefiting different gameplay types. Vibe Checker, an amazing name, thank you the Herta, will increase her attack by 60% for 2 turns at the start of the next battle. For treasure exploring, it will also mark 3 basic treasure locations on the map. And for Simulated Universe, it will also make you do true damage equal to a percentage of enemy max HP when entering battle, basically a one-shot versus normal enemies. Now let's check out Eidolons. As usual, a classic OP E2 bait is waiting for you. Her E1 calculates an additional 50% of the interpretation stacks based on the enemy with the highest stack amount. Basically, instead of considering 42 stacks, she will now consider 63, and therefore instead of 672%, you now get a multiply increase of 1008% on the primary target, 504% on all others. There's also some quality of life, as instead of now resetting to 1 stack when using her enhanced skill, it resets to 15 instead, useful if you spam ults. It's also very useful if you have her E2. This E2 gives her an additional inspiration stack and therefore an additional enhanced skill every time you ult. So 2 enhanced skills per ult, which is where the 15 stack reset from E1 comes into play for the back-to-back nukes. Oh, and she also advances her action by 35% when using an enhanced skill. Oh, and she also gets an inspiration stack at the start of battle. Very overloaded E2, it's a monster Eidolon. E4 is a classic E4, it's nice quality of life and maybe can make some cool speed tuning happen, but in most calculations won't amount to much. E6 gives 20% res pen and yet again more multiply increases, but this time for her ultimate, which is cool. It goes higher the fewer enemies on the field, meaning better single target power, but her E2 is the real E6 here. Here are my calculated Eidolon gains on the Herta with a team of the Herta, Serval, Hela, and Linksha. She is a weird one to calculate due to how much it can depend on enemy count, enemy RNG, enemy speed, team actions, teammates, etc. So I would check other calculations on top of my own. But now it's building time. What do we want on our 5-star Herta? Scholar Lost in Erudition will be her general best in slot 4-piece. It offers crit rate, ult damage bonus, and lots of skill damage bonus, which is where most of her power comes from. 4 ice is okay if you have leftovers from farming from ages ago, or if you're a wind set enjoyer. And those are really your only 4-piece options. However, there is one final niche option, and that is the brand new Poet of Morning Collapse. If you specifically do not unlock one or both of the speed traces on the Herta, you can reach under 95 speed with the set speed reduction, and capitalize on that 32% crit rate. Yes, the 2-piece isn't doing anything, but the crit rate is major. And she can run attack boots since her allies will enable her ult generation anyway. But this means you have to dodge speed subsets on pretty much every single piece, which isn't really feasible for most players, and it's especially hard to recommend straight away since it's a brand new set to farm. So I would just stick to Scholar. For Planars, you'll want Izumo for sure, since it's one of the strongest Planars in the game when fulfilled, and she will always be able to with her dual Erudition compositions. Rutilant Arena is a fine alternative if you have better pieces there, as it reinforces the enhanced skill's power. And in Pure Fiction, though she can be run outside of it, you can run Sigonia, of course, too. Since she can perform outside of these modes, I prefer sticking to Izumo. For main stats, opt for a crit chest piece. It will most likely be crit rate due to her 80% crit damage buff and best teammates giving a ton on top already. Then for boots, you can go speed or attack percent. Some teams will want you to go speed, for example if you want to properly tune your action order with Remembrance MC or a Sunday, or maybe you're using a 4-star Herta as your battery. Some teams can let you go attack percent though, and in general the Herta works really well with attack boots due to the fact that her allies are the ones supercharging her energy. Speed can help hit breakpoints, and with her burst potential it might be worth going for it, but both work, and both have come out ahead of one another in simulations depending on different factors. For Orb, opt for ice damage, and then for Rope, go for attack percent. Energy doesn't work as a reminder for the fixed energy gains from ally attacks, so not much point using it here. For a stat goal, aim for something like 100% crit rate and 200% crit damage in combat with her own buffs. This is considering Izumo and her 80% team-wide C damage buff, meaning out of combat we're looking at 88 to 120% ratio. If you run Sunday or RMC, you can drop CR for even more crit damage or attack percent. Then aim for a lot of attack. With only an attack main stat on your Rope, you can aim for 2.5 to 2.8k pre-combat. With attack boots on top, you're looking at 3 to 3.4k. And for speed, you either go base or 134 speed. If you use Jade and Deck Collector Herta, you want a bit more to let her hit the 134 breakpoint on wave 1. Now, what Lycones do we want on her? First, let's see her signature. A 12% CR buff to start off, then when ulting you get a 60% damage buff for both skills and ultimates for 3 turns. This is kinda baller for a lot of units. Finally, if the ult consumed 140 or more energy, you recover a skill point. So we have some massive damage gain and some utility in one little Lycone. I think it's a fantastic Lycone, but other options exist, and if you play in Pure Fiction only, she won't be needing this high damage gain. The SP is kinda necessary in a couple premium teams though. For E1 versus S1, they are similar in power, but only if you have a top tier alternative. So in fact, the S1 is pretty powerful to get, especially if you like Peaceful Day, Before Dawn or Himikone, whilst also being cheaper to pull. So if you can only choose one and don't plan on ever getting E2, then you could go for S1. But otherwise, E1 takes priority because E2 is just too strong to ignore. But for alternative Lycones, let's go C. If you don't have Himikone, your best bet will be Peaceful Day or Before Dawn, but Himikone can fall off a bunch into lower target scenarios. Argenti's signature also works as a pure stat stick and ult damage amp, but I wouldn't pull for it of course. Genius's Repose is a fantastic 4-star option if you are free to play, and the purely free options work if you've got nothing else. But now we can finish with teams. You'll always want an Erudition Sub DPS in the Herta teams, so let's discuss her options. First, we can eliminate Rapper, Jingyuan and Qingshui from the equation. So first off, Jade is one of the Herta's best sub DPSs due to her high self buffs, high damage, and decent attack frequency, not to mention her SP positivity. Her best stat collector would be Lingsha, and if you have both, then you're going to be pulverizing Pure Fiction. Just be careful with this team's SP economy, you might need Herta's S1 to help out. Deck Collector on the Herta isn't as crazy for her charges, as Herta runs attack percent boots in a lot of teams and doesn't have follow-up or ultimate spamming capabilities. It's still decent though, and the speed buff can help that low speed without having to swap boots. And with RMC, for example, advancing Herta a bunch, charge generation becomes quite decent to be honest. With this team, I managed to 2-cycle this future MOC 12, though the content was semi-AoE. Argenti with Thief Set, Energy Rope and Rome Fugue is an ult spamming beast in Pure Fiction, passing on top for even more energy during his turns. He literally cannot stop spewing out ultimates in this team and can dish out serious amounts of damage in Pure Fiction with all of these Super Break ultimates, whilst also enabling the Herta's energy. She can act as a safeguard here. You can ult when she's ready and still keep spamming Argenti ultimates before she uses her enhanced skill, using her bomber damage on the boss or to clear ads, that then lets new ones respawn for Argenti to break again. Himiko versus Fire or Ice Weak Pure Fiction works well, like she already does with the 4-star Herta. And again, you have the possibility of bringing Fugue for an insane follow-up attack frequency. I think I prefer other characters to her though. So Vol is an amazing and completely free sub DPS for Herta. I say sub DPS, but really you're going to want to turn her into a living battery. At E4 with 4 Eagle, 2 Vonwhack, Energy Rope and Passkey, she is zooming and ulting every single skill versus 5 enemies. Man, I'm so happy Passkey is getting more and more love. For some speed goals on her, at 140 speed with 2 ults you hit 3 turns in cycle 0 with Eagle and Vonwhack applied. Wave 2 won't use the Vonwhack Advance, so you need 167 speed for the 3 turns in cycle 0, or if you saved ult from the first half and can do 3 ults, you only need 150 speed. She acts so frequently and can generate some SP here and there if needed, while still generating a ton of energy for that 5-hit ultimate. Mini Herta is still excellent if you want to keep using her even after getting her true form. She can hit all enemies every single follow-up, and if you manage to keep staggering singular follow-ups, it stacks out for serious energy counts. Outside of pure fiction, she will struggle though, unless it's a fight with summons. When you've decided on your Erudition sub DPS, you'll want your support. Robin as always is top tier for dual DPS compositions, which is perfect for the Herta's Erudition loving kit. Concerto advancing the whole team means the Herta, a sub DPS and a potential third attacking ally like a sustain can all contribute to even more energy for the big bomber. Since we want frequent attacks, having a damage proc from Robin every time is also not too shabby. But do we need Robin? I actually really enjoyed Remembrance MC with the Herta, and I reckon they can sometimes beat Robin in this slot depending on your team and content. In fact, they cleared faster sometimes for me already in a couple MOC battles. Of course, ideally you go to Stainless and bring both of them and create a disgustingly OP DPS. Anyways, they bring a 1.5 times undiluted damage multiplier for the Herta. They action advance her, they give her crit damage and crit rate, they do decent damage of their own, and they even attack a ton, which will generate a bunch of energy for her. Note that her generating all this energy from allies attacking also means Mem gets extra charge. And when your sub DPS does negligible damage like a full speed Passkey Serval, then the hyperfocus buffs don't even matter. Herta self buffs a ton, and so the true damage is really nice and offers more damage gains over just more and more attack and damage that we already have. This gives us a completely free team, once you've pulled the 5-star of course, of the Herta, Serval, and Remembrance MC. Finally, Sunday is quite nice for her outside of pure fiction, as his 44 energy from ult is equivalent to about 5 ally attacks versus 1 to 3 enemies, and he achieves this before 5 turns have even passed. He also lets her take an extra turn of her own for more energy and interpretation, and at E2 Herta, you can spam back-to-back enhanced skills out the wazoo. For sustains, your best bet will be Lingsha, as her attack frequency is very high, and again you have the Jade Lingsha combo for pure fiction. Aventurine has high attack frequency versus many enemies, but Herta's advance could lose shield uptime, especially when paired with Remembrance MC or Robin or Sunday. But if you don't have Lingsha, Gallagher still works just as well when the enemy count is lower, and he generates much more SP, which may be nicer in certain compositions, or if your Herta has no signature cone. Attacking one enemy still counts as if he attacked 3 energy-wise for the Herta, and he can spam out turns thanks to his ultimate. With Quid Pro Quo, you also have the opportunity to generate 32 energy for the Herta, which is equivalent to nearly 4 attacks versus 1 to 3 enemies. Bohua is also great. More ults for the whole team means more attacks, meaning more ults for the Herta. Her energy can be a substitute for lack of attacks, and she can also use energy gifting cones. She further enables the 3 best Herta supports, Robin, Remembrance MC, and Sunday, with her energy as well. Here are some team comps I enjoyed and tested, and ones that worked really well. Let me know if you're pulling and who you're going to run with her down below. I really hope this video helped, and if it did, please consider liking and subbing and sharing. Thank you so much for watching and your support, and thank you to my amazing YouTube members as well. And of course, have a Guoba day.